I want to thank everybody for coming out in the inclement weather. Those of you who have four-wheel drive, was a little easier. Those that don't, you had to kind of struggle. What I'm going to share tonight is pivotal. I believe very firmly we're at the right place at the right time. And as everybody awakens to the truth, you're going to see differences occur in your lives to prove what you heard tonight is the truth. So it's a rare moment that I have a chance to introduce some of the teachings of the Zohar tonight. And as you hear the introduction to Volume 1, I think you'll agree with me how important it is. Before I get into that, I want to say that in the advertising that I put together with Brenda, on the bottom of the advertising, it says that John has been mentored by an Essene rabbi, a Hasidic rabbi, has received teachings and insights from gifted savants in several different states, and has completed numerous courses in esoteric sciences and Christian pastoral certificates. Of course, that's all true. Then I say he has found there is a shortcut to opening the inner kingdom, and that's what you're going to hear tonight, the shortcut. What I learned a long time ago was that the Bible is coded. The Old Testament is coded, and the New Testament is coded. The people of the code are the Jews. And for thousands of years, they don't want to share how they have unlocked the code unless you're a fellow Jew. So they have kept the keys to the code to their own groups. You know, when I lived in a Jewish family for 3.5 years in Escondido, California, you know, my rabbi, Dr. Emanuel Bronner, a master soap chemist of Bronner's Magic Soaps, a multimillionaire, was also an Essene rabbi. And on the Sabbath, when we got together, he began to tell me these sacred stories about the cave of Machpelah, about certain sacred sites around the globe, about, you know, what happened with Rabbi Hillel, why the Essenes were a separate group of Israelites, why they moved away from downtown Jerusalem and left the Pharisees and the Sadducees behind, and why they had such a strict religious belief system to preserve the word. So I've had people ask me, you know, why are the Jews the chosen people? And for all practical purposes, they're chosen to preserve the word, each and every letter, because each and every letter of the Holy Word is sacred. And you're going to hear some of that tonight. Now, there are a few key phrases that occur within the New Testament because Yeshua HaMashiach was a Essene, as you had just heard. Okay? We have an example from the King James in John chapter 4. And Jesus is speaking to a Samaritan. And the religious thought of that day is, don't share your sacred truths with non-Jews. Okay? Non-Jews, if you understand Judaism, are the Goyim. Okay, they're animalistic compared to the Jews because they don't have the keys to heaven. They don't have the keys to the Holy Word, and a lot of them don't want to hear the Word. However, if they wanted to become Jews or they wanted to become Israelites, then they would go through the teachings and the ceremonies, and then they could convert. Convert from what? Well, as far as the Jews were concerned, from ignorance into the light, from ignorance into the truth. Okay? So Jesus is now in front of the Samaritan woman, and the woman says in John chapter 4, verse 15, "Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come hither." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You have said well, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. And he who thou hast now is not thy husband, and so said you truly." The woman said, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is a place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will neither in this mountain nor at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you know not. We worship what we know, for salvation is of the Jews. That's John chapter 4. Then he says in Romans, or one of the apostles says in Romans chapter 3, what advantage has the Jew? Much every way, chiefly because unto them were committed the oracles of God. In the book of Romans chapter 2, near verse 27, he says, and will not the physically uncircumcised, if he fulfills the law, judge you who even with your written code and circumcision are a transgression of the law? For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly. So they have the code. What is this code? Well, what you find out if you proceed on this journey, and I'm sure a lot of you will, because it's very Coptic, is that for over 1,000 years, the Holy Grail is considered to be a chalice. But I found an article that was very, very revealing, and when I saw the picture that was part of the article, that was a 14th century painting, I almost fell out of my chair. The search for the vessel known as the Holy Grail became the principal quest of the knights of King Arthur. It was believed to be kept in a mysterious castle surrounded by wasteland and guarded by a custodian called the Fisher King, who suffered from a wound that would not heal. His recovery and the renewal of the blighted lands depended upon the successful completion of the quest. The legend of the Holy Grail is one of the most enduring in Western European literature. The Grail was said to be the cup of the Last Supper, and at the crucifixion to have received blood flowing from Christ's side. It was brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea, where it lay hidden for centuries. The magical properties attributed to the Holy Grail have been plausibly traced to the magic vessels of Celtic myth that satisfied the tastes and needs of all who ate and drank from them. The Holy Grail first appears in a written text, that would be non-Jewish, in the year 1180. During the next 50 years, several works, both in verse and prose, were written, although the story and the principal character vary from one work to the other. With the passing of the Middle Ages, the Grail disappears until the 19th century, when medieval history and legend awoke the interest of writers such as Scott and Tennyson and the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood and the composers, notably Richard Wagner. The symbol of the Grail as a mysterious object of search and as the source of the ultimate mystical or even physical experience has persisted into the present century in the novels of Charles Williams and C.S. Lewis. Now they show you the 14th century painting in this particular article that's from the British Library. And in this painting, Christ appears to a hermit in a vision. Christ is holding a book containing the true history of the Holy Grail. From History of the Holy Grail, French manuscript, early 14th century. So Christ is holding a book. That's where I almost fell out of my chair. Because this is the book he was very likely holding. I don't know it for sure, but I'm very confident it was. And that would be in the 1300s. And I'm going to explain why he was holding it. Why I believe he was holding it. This is volume 1 of 23 volumes. You will see in the Holy Grail that when it is being taught, you're going to see the Hebrew written from right to left, and beneath it, an English translation. Then you're going to see the next teaching in Hebrew written from right to left, and then you're going to see the English translation. And this is how all the books are written. Prior to the sacred teachings, you're going to have this introduction, which I brought tonight. Now, I'm almost done, probably 10 pages to go with volume 13. So I'm now starting volume 14. There are 23 volumes. I've read every page and every line. And let me tell you something. It has its effects. Why? Because it's the Holy Grail, the cup of immortality, the keys to the kingdom. In the beginning of volume 1, we have a little dedication to Moses. Rabbi Ashlag once wrote that when Moses saw darkness or something against his logic, he paid no attention to it. He covered his eyes and moved forward toward the light. Before I get into any of the readings of the Zohar at home, it's customary and it's taught by discipline. First of all, wash your hands. Second of all, before you open the sacred text, you have to read the prayer. So I'm going to read the prayer from the Ari. Ruler of the universe and master of all masters, the Father of mercy and forgiveness, we thank you, our God and the God of our fathers, by bowing down and kneeling, that you brought us closer to your Torah and your holy work, and you enable us to take part in the secrets of your holy Torah. How worthy are we that you grant us with such big favor. That is the reason we plead before you that you will forgive and acquit all our sins, and that they should not bring separation between you and us. And may it be your will before you, our God and the God of our fathers, that you will awaken and prepare our hearts to love and revere you, and may you listen to our utterances and open our closed heart to the hidden studies of your Torah. And may our study be pleasant before your place of honor as the aroma of sweet incense. And may you emanate to us light from the source of our soul to all of our being. And may the sparks of your holy servants, through which you revealed your wisdom to the world, shine. May their merit and the merit of their fathers and the merit of their Torah and holiness support us, so we shall not stumble through our study. And by their merit, enlighten our eyes and our learning, as it is stated by King David, the sweet singer of Israel, open my eyes so that I will see wonders from your Torah. Because from his mouth God gives wisdom and understanding. May the utterances of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, God, my strength and my Redeemer. I'm now going to go into part of the introductory pages of the Zohar that I think trigger a tremendous interest in anybody who wants to study it. And I'm going to go to Roman numeral page 22 at the beginning. It is with deep humility and awesome devotion that I share these few words of introduction to the first complete, authentic translation of the Zohar, the original Holy Grail. The volumes that follow are in fulfillment of the dream of Rav Yehuda Ashlag, the first contemporary Kabbalist, to bring these teachings to the English-speaking world. To that I say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuta L'Olam Vayed. Blessed be his glorious majesty forever. In the early 1960s, I was the only English-speaking student of the Kabbalah Center. Rav Yehuda Brandwein, heir to the legacy of Rav Ashlag, was my teacher. At that time, it was apparent to both Rav Brandwein and me that to disseminate Kabbalah would require setting down in the simplest language possible the major doctrines taught by Rav Ashlag. As a young man who had studied Kabbalah for only 3 years, I found the responsibility overwhelming. I knew, however, that Kabbalah was my destiny, and this gave me strength. I could not have known, of course, that in 1967 I would be designated as Rav Brandwein's heir apparent, or that just 1.5 years later he no longer would be among the living. Slowly, English volumes emerged. With myself and my family, every 2 years we would uproot from one country and relocate to the other. The migration required adjusting to another environment after each move. Still, we managed to keep our sons, Yehuda and Michael, in the same schools. The boys became so flexible, in fact, that each time they returned to their respective schools, they would remark that it feels like they had never left. Karen, my wife, and I formulated this program for preparing our sons to participate in our goal of alleviating pain and suffering from the human landscape. But we could never have succeeded alone. The matter indeed was completely coordinated by none other than the light force itself. When the idea of translating the Zohar into English came up, we all agreed it would be a monumental undertaking, but also an event in history. Understand that roughly only 50 years has the Zohar been in English, but for almost 9,000 years it's been in Hebrew. You learn something as you progress through the Zohar. The Hebrew is the original language. It's the language of Hashem. Hashem is Hebrew for the name because it's too sacred to pronounce the name. The actual name is 72 letters long. And there are legends that say that if a high rabbi pronounces the 72-letter name, he can turn mud into a man. He can turn clay into a man. You'll also learn in the Zohar that because it's the original language, there's something very, very sacred about it. According to the high teachings, your soul is constructed by the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet because it's the original language. I was listening to a rabbinical commentary here a week or so ago, and the rabbi was saying, if you go back 1,000 years or 800 years in France, they wouldn't be speaking the same French they're speaking today. Or if you go back 700 years in Germany, they wouldn't be speaking the same German that they're speaking today. But if you go back 1,000 years in Israel, they're speaking the same Hebrew they were speaking 9,000 years ago. The original language. Some say, well, Jesus spoke Aramaic. Well, yes, he did. A lot of them spoke Aramaic because that was the general language of the people, which was Phoenician to a certain extent, and it was used for commerce and trading and communicating amongst other people in the area of the Middle East and beyond the Middle East. Okay? But Hebrew is the sacred language, and there's a reason that the letters are constructed a certain way. Now, it is said in the Zohar that each Hebrew letter has its own energy, its own sacred energy. And it is said in the Zohar that even if you don't understand what you're reading in the Hebrew, read it anyways, because it's going to unlock what's happening in your mind all the way down to your soul, beyond your DNA, just by scanning the letters. Now, the scientific world says, well, that's not possible to have that type of revelation. Well, they're corrected by modern science because when you go out shopping, you see a barcode and a light scans a barcode, and that light computer connected to the barcode deciphers everything containing in that product, where it came from, where it's headed, where it was manufactured, et cetera, et cetera. When you scan the Hebrew letters of the Zohar, of the Holy Grail, you're going beyond anything that a computer could decipher in a barcode. Believe me, the Almighty understands how the human mind works. He designed it. So as you read the sacred text, things happen to you, but you'll never know if you don't take time to read it. So there has to be a little bit of discipline. You have to work on your own journey. You have to work on your own awakening. This is your responsibility. And by scanning the letters of the Zohar, you have the shortcut. What will the shortcut do for you? You won't believe it until you start on your journey. Because it's the original language. It's the language of the Almighty. Now listen what the Zohar says about the first revelation. The world was created with parallel universes. The flawless universe was known as the Tree of Life reality and the Tree of Knowledge reality. The Tree of Knowledge universe consisted of good and evil. Humankind has free will to opt for the good consciousness of sharing and self-judgment rather than being judgmental of others, or the evil of this physical material reality. When we have a positive attitude toward others, which John Davis back there exemplifies all the time, better than anybody I know, when we have a positive attitude toward others, we have connected to the good of the Tree of Knowledge universe and have created a bridge to the universe of Tree of Life, which contains no form of chaos. Here's a secret. Before Adam connected with the evil of the Tree of Knowledge, chaos did not exist. When Adam ate of the forbidden fruit of the Tree of Knowledge, he established a connection to chaos. During the following 2,300 years, the world tested chaos in its extreme with the ultimate of chaos, death. The revelation event on Mount Sinai was the result of humanity's never-ending experience of chaos and death. God saw no future but would or could change this situation. Therefore, the scroll, which contained the information and energy to bring about the demise of chaos, was introduced. Was it a revelation to Jews only? Was it for the purpose of establishing the Jewish people as a nation? Was it for creation of religion? The Kabbalistic response to these questions is a very definite one. No. All the nations were privy to this event. It is unconscionable to presume that God would present the deity of beneficence to one nation and not others. To assume that Jews were the favored people of the universe to the exclusion of other people of God's creation is a corruption. Yet, it has been the popular version of Revelation. But God, in his infinite compassion toward his creation, again attempted to remove chaos from our midst. Thus was born the second revelation, the transmission of the Holy Grail, the Zohar, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Elazar 2,000 years ago in a cave in the remote village of Pequim in the northern Galilee region of the Holy Land. During the Exodus, Moses had returned from the upper realm with God to receive the physical scroll. The purpose for his return was to create a link between immaterial energy of Revelation 1 that became infused with the cosmos by virtue of all peoples of the earth listening to the word of God, and our physical realm where the light force would become encased within a physical scroll to be tapped to any occasion by all of humankind. The people then would have access to this enormous reservoir of beneficence. They no longer would be in need of any intermediaries to act on their behalf with God. You see, the Zohar is direct connect. It's you and God. That's it. When you scan the letters of the Hebrew in the Holy Grail, it's you and God there. There's no intermediary. It's a lot better than AT&T. The heir of Rav at the time of Mount Sinai's revelation, which means in Hebrew the mixed multitude, had other plans. Moses, who was to return after spending 40 days with the Creator, did not return at the appointed time. Shy of 6 hours, the Erev Rav seized on the opportunity to convince the other Jews to create a replacement for Moses, who would act as an intermediary for the rest of the Jews. All throughout time, a lot of us have been convinced and taught we have to have an intermediary. There has to be a priest. There has to be a rabbi. There has to be a mentor. There has to be a yogi. There has to be a master. There has to be a conduit. The Holy Grail's direct connect. Did they have a problem at Mount Sinai? Yes, they did. The plan of the Erev Rav, when Moses was bringing the scroll, the Holy Grail, down from a higher realm, was to create a living, speaking, golden calf. And this would establish the Erev Rav as an authoritative link to God. In this way, they could manipulate the people and enhance their egos and position. They knew that Revelation 1 would subsequently restore humankind would subsequently restore to humankind its right to control its own destiny. When the golden calf came into being, the plan of the Erev Rav became established within the consciousness of the Jews. They had brought their well-designed strategy to fruition. The Jews had fallen from their spiritual immaterial consciousness of mind over matter and immortality. They had severed their ties with the light force and its immaterial region of dominion over the physical and material reality of existence. You think you have a problem with sorcery today? The golden calf was speaking. Even when you read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, when you read the migrations through Egypt, you see the sorcery that goes on by the priests under the Pharaoh. Here you have a golden calf speaking. Yes. To pull people away from direct connect, there has to be something. The dark side, Satan and his minions, have to perform something to pull you away. So is sorcery powerful? Moses would walk away from it. Can't touch me. Just say, can't touch me. But it does capture a lot of people's minds. And therefore, the connection to the chosen people of God to carry the sacred word was severed. And the Zohar then went back to heaven, where it came from, because they weren't worthy. They didn't choose the totality of the Zohar over the talking golden calf. Why? Because Hollywood was more entertaining. Moses is coming down with a scroll, even though it's from a higher dimension, and you're seeing the lightning and the smoke and the top of the mountain and everything else. Hey, how's it going to beat Marvel Comics come to life with their superheroes, right? How's it going to beat that? Well, if you had any common sense, you know it would beat it. So Moses shattered the scroll. And with its shattering was lost humankind's first opportunity since the sin of Adam 2,400 years earlier to rid the world of chaos, pain, and suffering. Although Moses returned to the mount for the second scroll, the eternal energy to usher in immortality was lost. God told Moses these people could deliver only destruction, chaos, pain, and suffering to the entire world. One day God told Moses, when the people have reached a high spiritual consciousness, these destructive Erev Rav would be swept into the positive consciousness of the people, and they, the Erev Rav Jews, the mixed multitude Jews, would change. They would cause immeasurable harm in the interim. The world, Jew and non-Jew alike, would suffer until everyone despaired. Because Moses paid no heed to God's warning, we all suffer to this day. Thus, 1,300 years elapsed since revelation on Mount Sinai, culminating in further human suffering and the destruction of Temple 1 and Temple 2. This destruction affected everyone and everything in the universe. At that moment, the Holy Grail of the Zohar made its appearance to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Elazar. While nothing could duplicate the light force power of the first scroll, the revealment of the Zohar would now provide a second opportunity for humankind to rid the world of chaos. For a second time in history, corruption and manipulation prevented its power from being widespread. The forces of authority again prevailed, concealing the truth about Revelation 1 and the revealment of the Zohar. These Jews, sometimes known as the Pharisees and Sadducees back 2,000 years ago, or we'll say bad guy Jews, were and continue to be the underlying cause of anti-Semitism. This was one of the secrets of the Zohar that Erev Rav feared most, and knew that this placed their authority in jeopardy. Were the people to become aware of why anti-Semitism exists, they would immediately reject these hateful authoritarians. If the Holy Grail became widespread, there would be no further need of intermediaries or the deity and its authority. The Jews and all of mankind would finally achieve that long sought-after goal of eliminating chaos. When Rabbi Ashlag, who was receiving the Zohar, began to produce his writings, he was met with vigorous opposition from the ecclesiastical authorities. When he assured them that he would restrict his teachings to select scholars, he was then left alone. Rabbi Ashlag realized his vision of the Holy Grail became available to everyone. Little did the authorities dream that the seeds of Rav Ashlag's efforts were to blossom only 40 years later. Everyone was fully convinced that this new episode amidst the 3,400-year history would simply fade into oblivion, as had earlier attempts to bring the Holy Grail to the people. When the doors of the Kabbalah Center were finally flung open in 1971, many came to drink from the wellspring. Others launched attacks. The center was breaking with a 4,000-year-old tradition, and this could not be tolerated. What kind of effects does the Zohar have when it's received? I lived with Rabbi Emanuel Bronner. He was from Heilbronn, Germany. Both his parents died in Auschwitz. I got to hear the stories over and over again, and why he packed his bags and flew to New York to start over from ground zero. So I had direct stories of what it was like in Germany in World War II through Rabbi Bronner. The introduction of the Zohar says, in 1936, Rav Ashlag warned of the black cloud of chaos and catastrophe that hovered over Europe. He warned of a disaster that would engulf the entire world. He declared that to prevent the impending Holocaust, the Jewish people must embrace the Holy Zohar. But his plea was ignored. Some might doubt that the Holy Zohar could have prevented the Holocaust in Europe during 1940 through 1945. To demonstrate that the words of Rav Ashlag were the words of truth, however, let us consider Morocco. The events surrounding this small protectorate in North Africa during the German-Italian campaign and General Rommel's drive to capture all of North Africa and then move on for the final triumphant march against Jerusalem provide clear evidence of the power of the Holy Zohar and the truth of Rav Ashlag's words. Rommel, the commander of the German armed forces, invaded Morocco because at that time it was a protectorate, a country without an army of its own under the protection of the League of Nations. Rommel demanded that the king of the land hand over Morocco's 250,000 Jews. The king refused. And to the amazement of the king, historians, and the Jews themselves, General Rommel bowed his head and said, "Good day." The Germans' high command final solution demanded that the Jews took precedence over every need of the army. If there was a shortage of rail cars, for instance, transporting Jews to death camps would override supplying soldiers with arms, ammunition, or food. So historians have been puzzled over why Rommel took no as an answer from the King of Morocco, especially since the general was acting in direct defiance of Hitler's final solution, and since the mighty German war machine easily could have conquered this little country. This enigmatic event in history still baffles all who have heard about it. But to the Kabbalists, the answer is simple. It resides in the realm of the metaphysical. For the Jews in Morocco, as well as in other Muslim countries, life did not exist without the Holy Zohar. The Saturday evening Sabbath readings were part of their tradition. They never knew a life without the Zohar. The energy and the power of the Zohar could achieve the impossible task of mind control over the evil of physical reality. Because of the Zohar, Rommel had no free will to execute his devilish plan of lingering and delivering 250,000 Jews to their deaths. Here lay the remarkable plea of Rav Ashlag. He knew the Zohar could transform the ghastly plan of extermination into a life filled with hope. The holy compilation of teachings is replete with tales and demonstrate its incredible power and its status as a producer of miracles and wonders. What we have here is proof positive of two realms of existence. One realm of existence is the flawless, non-chaotic realm that is free of pain and suffering. This is known as the tree of life reality. If we make contact with this reality and our connection with it, we leave the familiar landscape of chaos where we are surrounded by the endless and insurmountable problems of life. When Adam ate from the tree of life, he drew nourishment from that state of the light force that provides a flawless environment of beneficence and a life free of chaos. When I go to my favorite teachings in the Coptic Center, Egypt's Master Voice, I found a few links. And before I close, I want to share one of the links. This is from Book 3. The resurrection referred as often to the illumination necessary to leave the dead things of sense as to functioning in the spiritual body after death of the physical one. Here's the reason for learning, here and now, how to become conscious of one's own self-identity independent of the physical body. Let us glance at the pilgrimage of the soul as depicted in the Book of the Dead. Here's a chapter on spearing the serpent of darkness. Another on reading a chapter in the presence of the serpent on two legs. The one symbolized evil, the other wisdom. Serpent of wisdom was a phrase used to indicate the reborn sons of the good law. To be wise as serpents and as harmless as doves is the way to teaching, and it's given in the New Testament. The serpent is an old symbol, used to convey to the uneducated and popular mind the idea of rebirth and immortality. In that, the dormant condition and shedding of its skin is followed by renewed life. In the Egyptian teachings, there is a chapter on beating back the crocodile, an enemy of the soul, and yet a sacred animal, because the crocodile is an ideograph of the double nature of man. The crocodile drew himself up on the banks of the Nile at sunrise, and while the upper half of the body was bathed in light, the lower part remained hidden in the muddied water. Even the least developed intellect could grasp the idea of a better nature of man lighted by the God Ra as a symbol of a spark from the divine consciousness, and a lower nature which thrives in the mire of self-pity and self-love. The crocodile is a sacred symbol, but regarded as a foe in the Book of the Dead, because the soul must fight its way to light and life. The reborn sons of the good law, in what I see in the Egyptian master of teaching, master's voice, the good law is the Zohar, which brings us order and divine union with the Almighty. There is a divine plan, and everything the Almighty has is divine order. But if we step out of his teachings and we step out of a direct connection state, we're into the tree of knowledge of good and evil reality. We're in chaos. We're in a multiple universe here. All you have to do is step out and say, I've got a better way. I can do it my way. But if you step into the Zohar, if you step into the Holy Grail, you have the shortcut. You have the keys to the kingdom. You have direct connect. You have the potential for immortality and a whole lot more. So I encourage everybody, get the Zohar. Every second Tuesday and every fourth Tuesday of the month, I'm here. I show up at about 6:30. My last time here was, I think I got out at 10 o'clock. How late was it, Jacob? I think Jacob was here.
10:30.
Jacob came for the first time. Very welcome to have you. Thanks for coming tonight and all the other nights. So I want to say that in my mind, there's no other sacred book on the planet. And we have an opportunity to collectively read it. We have an opportunity to individually read it. But let the Zohar go to work in your life. Let the Holy Grail go to work in your life. Follow what was in this 14th century painting when Jesus walked up with a book in his hand. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. It's been a pleasure to share this with you. Thank you.